we are seeing diminishing demand for the first dose of the vaccines. We have only 100,000 bookings over the next 7 days. And for us to reach the 70% threshold that we plan 2 weeks after, we need about 115,000 more people to get their first dose of vaccine. So we're getting to that critical point right now where every additional person who decides to get the first dose is going to be able to accelerate the full openness of Alberta. So if you've been holding back for one reason or another, now is the time over the next week to get the jab so that we can move forward more quickly with the full open for summer plan. Another point I wanted to raise, I did some consultations over the weekend, and I had business owners asking if this was just an open for summer plan or if it is also going to go into the fall. They were concerned that everything would be, that the public health restrictions will be reimposed in the fall. And I'm sorry if the open for summer idea gave people that impression. But so let me be very clear. Now, this is our plan to be open for good. Obviously, the virus will continue to circulate, but the vaccines are increasingly demonstrating that they defeat the virus. And by the time we get to the fall, we can expect, as is always the case with a contagious disease of this nature, that there will be a fall spike based on weather, seasonality, and other factors. But and there will be new variants, and they'll come and go. But the key thing is just growing that protection of our population through the vaccines, and we are very confident that by the time we get into the fall, by the time we get into late September, for example, that we will be approaching 80% both first and second dose coverage in our population, and we'll be able to maintain that freedom. Like with any contagious disease, we've got to keep our eye on it. But folks, this is not just for the summer. This is the open for business, open for good plan. Now, I do want to address something that has been a real controversy and growing in recent days, and that was the fact that last Tuesday night I hosted a working dinner for staff and a few colleagues in the Premier's office here in Edmonton on the deck outside my office. For the past 16 months, I have tried hard to observe the public health rules. I thought it's important for me to lead by example, but I have to admit I haven't always done that perfectly. I can think of many cases where I've been within 2 meters of people, and that, I'm sure, has been the case for the past 16 months for pretty much everybody in Alberta, the vast majority of whom have tried to follow these rules, but sometimes may have found themselves within 2 meters of others. Last Tuesday, I had a planning meeting scheduled with colleagues and staff, and because it was going to be a lengthy evening meeting, I asked that we bring in some takeout to do it over dinner. And because we had just opened that day in phase 1 to outdoor gatherings of up to 10 people, I thought it was actually prudent and better to do that meeting outdoors on a deck. We took precautions to do it in a distanced way, trying to observe the rules. In fact, we set up 4 contiguous tables and spaced chairs out. We've actually gone up and measured the chairs since this became a controversy, and apparently 4 of us were 2 meters or more between each other, but two of those chairs were less than 2 meters distance, and there's no doubt that over the course of the evening, people came within the 2 meter distance that is laid out in the public health guidelines. And I regret that. I regret that the perception this has created. Quite frankly, when somebody said, "Are you sure you should be doing this? This is in public view," my response was, yes, we're allowed to follow the rules. And I thought, if anything, it's a positive thing to show the openness at phase 1 of the Open for Summer plan with the social gatherings of up to 10 people. I certainly thought it was better that we meet outdoors than indoors. We've pretty much suspended most indoor meetings over the past 3 months since we got into the spring spike, but we have begun in recent days, in the last couple of weeks since the legislature come back, to have small in-person gatherings for longer meetings. And again, I thought it was prudent and compliant with the rules to do this outside. But it's clear that at some points in that evening, we were not all distanced from one another by 2 meters. And I truly regret that. I take full responsibility for this. I invited my colleagues there. I was of the clear view that we were complying with the Open for Summer rules, but it is clear that some of us were not distanced the whole night, and I have to take responsibility for that. We have to set a higher example, a higher threshold of conduct, and so I want sincerely to apologize to my colleagues and to Albertans for letting you down, for not being more careful to scrupulously follow every aspect of the public health guidelines that we expect of everyone. And so I sincerely regret that the decision that we made. We should have taken extra precautions to be distanced, and I just won't be doing any social gatherings until we get into phase 3, just to avoid any possible mistakes or misunderstandings. So I sincerely apologize again. I take full responsibility, and I hope to learn from this, as I say, in ensuring that we not be put in a position of violating the distance guidelines and the other important public health measures which remain in place until we get to phase 3. And with that, I'm happy to take your questions.
Perfect. We'll now go to the phones for questions. 2 questions each, either 1 question, 1 follow-up, or 2 off the top. Operator, can you please put through our first caller?
James Keller, Globe and Mail.
Hi, Premier. Your initial reaction to this outdoor dinner was to insist you didn't do anything wrong. Members of your staff were mocking people online for suggesting otherwise. And you handled the issue of the international travel at Christmas essentially in the same way. So how do you expect Albertans to believe that this apology, or really any other apology that follows this playbook, is actually sincere?
Well, I'll just restate what the point I've made, which is that I knew we were doing this outdoor gathering in full public view, in the understanding that we were complying with the rules, and particularly given the 10-person outdoor gathering rule that which we brought into effect on Tuesday morning. And I've been encouraging Albertans to move things outdoors. I honestly believed it was better to meet outdoors than indoors. I've held many meetings on that deck over the course of the past 16 months. And none of those had been controversial. We always try to do that in a socially distanced way. And so, but I've heard people clearly. I've heard from caucus colleagues and others. And we've gone back and reviewed this and realized that not everybody was within, maintained the 2-meter distance throughout. And recognizing that, I'm apologizing for that fact. In terms of, you know, the fact of the matter is that people are permitted to do social outdoor gatherings of up to 10. The rules ask that they maintain that distance. We should have been more careful to do so, and I apologize that we didn't.
Operator, can you please put through our next caller?
Bill Fortier, CTV.
Hi, Premier. You admit that distancing rules were broken non-intentionally, and I'm curious how you can expect Albertans to understand, remember, and follow the rules as you've asked them multiple times if the Premier and the Health Minister apparently can't.
Well, actually, he and I were seated more than 2 meters apart, but a couple of the 6 seats were closer than that. What we've always asked is that people do their best. I don't think anybody's walked around for the past 16 months with a 2-meter yardstick. I find myself in lots of circumstances where I am at gatherings and find myself less than 2 meters from people. I was just in front of one of your TV cameras on Saturday at the vaccine clinic in Northeast Calgary, where a number of the wonderful local volunteers doing brilliant work came to chat and explained to me what they were doing, and I'm pretty sure we were within 2 meters of one another. Often that gets me into what I call the COVID 2-step, where I kind of back up and people naturally come within a discussion distance. That I can think that's happened for me dozens of times over the past 16 months. So we've never asked people to walk around with a 2-meter rule stick. We've asked people to exercise good judgment and discretion. We tried to distance out. There were 4 tables there, 6 people spread around. But we should have done better. That's clear. In retrospect, we should have made it impossible for us to be within 2 meters of one another, and I regret that we didn't take that extra precaution.
Do you have a follow-up, Bill?
Yeah, just a quick one, and forgive me if I misheard this. I thought I heard you say that this dinner, as you called it last week, did you say it was a meeting, that the decision was made to take a meeting outside? And if so, what appeared to be a bottle of whiskey was on the table. So if it was a meeting, I'm wondering if it's customary and normal to have a bottle of whiskey at a meeting.
Somebody gave me one for my 30th birthday. It was scheduled as a business meeting. I decided to take it outside, and in fact, I did so because I thought this could be seen as a social function. We have a total ban on indoor social functions. It was a gathering to discuss government business. That's what we did for 3.5 hours or more on a range of important public issues, and I thought it was in an excess of caution best to do that outdoors, where the chances of transmission are radically lower than indoors. Again, that's why we ask people, if they're going to socialize or get together, to do so outside. It's why I've also held meetings on that deck before many times over the past 16 months.
Operator, can you please put through our next caller?
Dean Bennett, Canadian Press.
Hi, Premier. So I'm trying to understand what happened last week. You were pretty careful in what you said. This was not a breach. We saw a picture. Clearly, you're breaking the 2-meter distance, and you're telling Albertans, no, what you see in this picture is not what it actually is. Believe me, there is no health violations here. And then when you were asked in the House about it on Thursday, you were very careful to give half an answer. No, we were within the 10-person limit. You never addressed the masks. You never addressed the distancing. It was half an answer. And now you're telling us today, we've done a research, we measured chairs, and now we realize that we weren't within distancing. Premier, I put it to you, sir, that you knew this last week. You saw the picture. You knew that you had broken the rules. But you did it anyway. But you decided for whatever reason that you're going to tell people what they see is not what they see. It was gaslighting, Premier. You did it, and now you're going to apologize today, not because it's wrong, but because you're facing a mini revolt in your cabinet and caucus. Is that true, sir? Well,
Dean, first of all, there is no mask mandate for outdoors whatsoever. There never has been in Alberta. Secondly, the reason we decided to do this was outdoors was because just that day we had permitted 10 people to gather outdoors, and we did try to socially distance with 4 contiguous tables. We measured the diameter around them at 38 feet. A couple of the seats were less than 2 meters apart. And there's no doubt as people moved around in the course of the evening and violated the 2 meters of distancing. So I've reflected on that. I can tell you that none of we fully knew we were in public view there. Again, when somebody said, "Are you sure we should be gathering outdoors?" I said, "Well, it's a lot better than indoors. It's permitted by the rules. We're allowed to follow the rules. We tried to socially distance out there. We didn't do a good enough job of it, and I truly regret that because we should be held to a higher standard, and that falls on me."
And do you have a brief follow-up, Dean?
Yeah, Premier, I don't like to call you out. But I think it's a question that deserves to be asked. It looks to me, in the totality of it, you knew last week you had broken the rules. You decided to gaslight the very people you represent. And that matters because if you'll gaslight us on this, what else will you gaslight us on? So why did you gaslight us last week when you said that you did not break any health rules? So,
Dean, I was, again, we were following the rule for 10 people outdoor gatherings. We had made efforts to socially distance. If we hadn't done that, we could have just gathered around one of these 4 tables. We set up 4 contiguous tables, made a purposeful effort to distance them out, and believed we were in compliance with the rules. We've taken a closer look at this. We've heard from people, and that's why I acknowledge that the social distancing rule was not perfectly followed throughout the evening, and that is for which I accept responsibility and for which I apologize, because we are expected to be at a higher standard. I will say this, Dean, you can go back and I'm sure find lots of pictures. I'm sure people are already looking over the past 16 months and find me at lots of different events where I am within 2 meters of other people. And so I think that is one rule where I and other Albertans have generally tried to be conscious of it and follow it, but probably haven't done it perfectly for the last 16 months. And so I don't want everybody in Alberta to get out there and think that they're in gross violation of the rules if at some point they were 1.5 meters away from somebody at an outdoor function, for example. But we should be kept to a higher standard. I recognize that, I'm acknowledging that, and I'm apologizing for the fact that we didn't meet that standard last Tuesday.
It is now 1:50 and it is oral question period, and the Leader of Her Majesty's Loyal Opposition has the call.
Quote, "We never broke the rules. It was a working dinner. Jameson's is not the finest whiskey." Mr. Speaker, last week the Premier gave every excuse he could think of to try and justify breaking the very rules he was asking Albertans to follow. Now, because the Premier can't tell right from wrong, it's taken 6 days of public outrage and outspoken MLAs for the Premier to apologize, after both he and his staff mocked Albertans who were so rightfully disappointed by his behaviour. Why is this Premier's moral compass so fundamentally broken?
The Honourable the Premier.
Mr. Speaker, last week I hosted colleagues and staff to a working dinner to discuss government business. Decided to do it outdoors rather than indoors, decided to bring in some takeout to discuss for 3.5 hours government business. And we did so in full public view. As I said, we have the right to follow the rules, trying to embrace the 10-person outdoor social limit. It's now clear that a couple of us at some points in the night did not maintain the 2-meter distance, and for that I truly regret and apologize.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, no one is perfect. I understand that, but the Premier isn't actually sorry he broke the rules. He's not sorry that he mocked this House, and he's not sorry he gaslit the public. He's sorry that Albertans won't stand for it. So this isn't sincere. This is self-serving. To the Premier, how can Albertans trust him when he won't tell the truth until his own grip on power is what's under threat?
The Honourable the Premier.
Mr. Speaker, the truth is this. On Tuesday, we went to Phase 1 of the Open for Summer plan, which permits outdoor gatherings of up to 10 people. The same night, we had a meeting planned for government planning purposes. Decided to do it more safely outdoors. We decided to bring in some takeout. We set up 4 contiguous tables to physically distance. Most of those positions were physically distanced throughout the night, but it's clear that often as when people get together, people move around, and in this case, some people were within the 2-meter limit. For that, I apologize, because we should be held to a higher standard, and the Leader is right about that.
The Leader of the Opposition.
Well, Mr. Speaker, the fact is, last 30, this Premier repeatedly told the House he did not break the rules. He had the rules read to him, and he still claimed he didn't break them. His staff told the media he was not breaking the rules. He told Albertans they shouldn't trust what they could see in front of their very own eyes. Will the Premier apologize to Albertans and to his colleagues in the House right now for once again saying in this House things that he knew were not true?
The Honourable the Premier.
Well, in fact, Mr. Speaker, we made every reasonable effort to maintain social distancing with 4 contiguous tables, 6 positions spread out against them. But, Mr. Speaker, was there a perfect compliance with the 2-meter rule for a 3.5-hour meeting? No, there wasn't, and for that I apologize.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Still looking for the apology to this House, Mr. Speaker. Now, over the weekend, we learned that 10 acute care beds at the St. Paul Health Care Centre will close, along with 5 beds at the Elk Point Health Centre. These closures are due to a chronic shortage of staff, one caused by the Health Minister attacking doctors and threatening nurses with wage rollbacks and pink slips. So to the Premier, while you and the Health Minister were sipping whiskey in the Sky Palace, rural Albertans were losing health care. What are you going to do to restore services to those rural communities?
The Honourable the Premier.
Well, Mr. Speaker, all this stuff about the Sky Palace, I'd like to ask the Leader of the NDP, did she never host colleagues on the terrace of the Premier's office here at the federal building? Or is that just hypocrisy? With respect to healthcare, Mr. Speaker, this government has added $90 million for the recruitment and retention of rural physicians. Obviously, the workforce has been affected by the spring spike of COVID-19. Alberta Health Services is working diligently to address any shortfalls in staffing anywhere in the province right now.
You're the opposition.
Well, Mr. Speaker, if the Premier wants to ask me questions, I'm happy to switch places. Maybe we'd finally get somebody working on jobs in this province. But in addition to closing beds, the St. Paul Health Centre has had to halt surgeries twice in the last 2 weeks due to a lack of doctors. And in Elk Point, their ER won't have any doctors on Tuesdays and Thursdays until further notice. Newsflash, people don't make appointments for emergencies, Mr. Speaker. Does the Premier believe that an emergency room with no doctors is an acceptable level of service for a rural community, or is this just another way that you're letting the rural communities in?
The Honourable the Premier.
Mr. Speaker, with respect to the economy, I'm pleased to report that the Conference Board of Canada today projects that, quote, Alberta is forecast to post the strongest rebound amongst all provinces with a gain of 7.2% in real GDP forecast for 2021. With respect to rural physicians, we've added an additional $90 million to have by far the most generous incentives for recruitment and retention of rural physicians. But it's true that the locum pool, Mr. Speaker, of physicians who are available for temporary assignment was diminished during the spring spike, but AHS is getting back on top of that to ensure full service coverage.
The Honourable the Leader of the Opposition.
And Mr. Speaker, the Premier is letting down rural Albertans across Alberta. In Westlock, the health centre stopped performing C-sections for a month due to a lack of doctors. In Galahad, 18 seniors were tossed from their homes because the Premier failed to contain the third wave. We've seen ER closures in both Fairview and Rocky Mountain House. Why doesn't the Premier give a sober second thought on his plan to fire nurses and attack doctors? What needs to happen for him to start caring about rural Albertans' health care?
The Honourable the Minister of Health has risen.
Mr. Speaker, 35 seconds is not going to be enough to correct all of the misinformation that was just said by the Leader. But I'll start with a few of them. We have added 833 new nurses throughout the last year. Mr. Speaker, we have added $90 million to recruit more physicians. We've had a net increase of physicians throughout the province. And last week, the critic for the NDP, the health critic, misinformed this House by trying to claim that AHS had closed the Galahad Care Centre is totally false. 18 residents were temporarily moved, as many residents have been moved throughout the pandemic to make sure everyone gets the care they deserve.
The point of order is noted at 156 and 157. The Honourable Member for Edmonton Glenora has the call.
Mr. Speaker, imagine a world where the Justice Minister commits a felony. Imagine a world where the Transportation Minister speeds down the highway at 200 kilometres an hour. Imagine a world where the Minister of Environment hunts illegally and yells at fish and game officers trying to enforce the law. To the Premier, tell me how the Minister of Health breaching public health orders in the middle of a pandemic is any different from any of the outrageous examples I just provided.
The Honourable the Premier.
Mr. Speaker, is the member for Edmonton Glenora going to stand in this place and say that over the past 16 months she has never been within 2 meters of someone else?
Glenora.
Wow. The health minister did break the public health rules that he put in place. When his colleagues did at Christmas, he said, quote, "We campaigned on hard work and humility. Some people forgot about that last part." The Premier said at the time that he would remove people from their post who breached the public health orders. He made that very clear. Will the Premier remove the Health Minister, the Environment Minister, and the Finance Minister from their positions, or will he keep his word to his drinking buddies over the public?
The Honourable the Premier.
Mr. Speaker, I said that about people who intentionally engage in or counsel civil disobedience. I have been very clear, Mr. Speaker, over the past 60 months, I've tried to follow the public health guidelines, but there are many cases where I've found myself within 2 meters of other people not from my household, and I suspect that's true of about 4.5 million Albertans.
The Honourable the Member for Edmonton Glenora.
Premier, the Jameson 4 should be no more. It's simple. They should be out of their jobs. By your own words, Premier. Don't explain it to us. Stand in this House and explain to your colleagues, you know, the ones who didn't booze it up on the roof of the Sky Palace, while the 4 of you were breaking the rules that apply to everyone else in Alberta. Why are you better than everyone else, Premier?
The Honourable the Premier.
Mr. Speaker, every day I go to events in the public, vaccine centres, press conferences, and I see people standing within 2 meters of each other. Nobody is flagrantly seeking to violate the rules. People try to take care, as we did by distancing around 4 contiguous tables. Did we maintain a 2-meter distance perfectly over the course of 3.5 hours? No. That I regret. But, Mr. Speaker, I expect people to understand that these rules are applied in a common-sense way, and 4.5 million Albertans have tried to do so.
The honourable member for Lethbridge West.
Well, Mr. Speaker, as the Minister of Finance was taking a booze cruise over the COVID rules on the terrace of the Sky Palace, Morgan Stanley was busy packing up the boxes as they shut down their Calgary office. Yeah. Jobs and investment leaving downtown Calgary, not a care in the world from this minister. Too busy breaking the public health orders and looking down on 200,000 unemployed Albertans from his castle perch. Albertans are outraged with this government, so first things first. Will the Minister of Finance apologize to the House, to Albertans, and apparently he needs to also to his caucus team for his part in the law-breaking party on the Sky Palace?
The Honourable the Premier's resident.
Well, Mr. Speaker, in fact, Statistics Canada reported in its labour force survey last Friday that unemployment has reached its lowest level since the beginning of the pandemic, with significant job growth in high-paying sectors like construction and natural resources. Last week, we announced with emphasis the creation of 1,000 new high-paying, high-tech jobs in Calgary, part of a huge tech boom that we're seeing in the province, with thousands of new jobs coming in response to our pro-business policies. And today, the Conference Board is projecting that Alberta will lead Canada in economic growth.
The honourable member for Lethbridge West.
Well, no apology from the Minister of Finance, Mr. Speaker. He's got the worst performing economic recovery in Canada. He's got plenty of time for high-end dining atop the Sky Palace, served up on fine linens. But does he have time to do his job? Albertans want to know. So after popping a couple of ibuprofen on Wednesday morning, did the Minister of Finance call Morgan Stanley and ask them if chasing away renewables investment with climate denial and uncertainty, chasing away tech jobs with separatism and uncertainty, chasing away companies of all kinds with uncertainty around CPP, had anything to do with Morgan Stanley leaving, or did he sleep in that one?
The Honourable the Premier.
Mr. Speaker, the member opposite just said Alberta has the worst recovery in Canada. Today, the Conference Board of Canada, a highly respected nonpartisan think tank, said that Alberta is forecast to post the strongest rebound among the provinces, with a gain of 7.2% in real GDP forecast for 2021. We're halfway through 2021, Mr. Speaker. This is based not just on a forecast, but where we are so far. And with respect to renewables, we have seen more announcements of capital investment in renewable energy than ever in Alberta history under this government, without a dime in taxpayer subsidies.
The honourable member.
Still no apology from the Minister of Finance. Can't stand up and speak for himself. Billions of dollars in accounting errors and giveaways. Billions wasted on betting on Donald Trump. America's biggest bank leaving downtown Calgary. Still, this finance minister cannot rise in his place and apologize to Albertans or his own caucus mates, because he still thinks that dining atop the Sky Palace is a luxury Alberta can afford. But economic diversification, good jobs, that's too much to ask. Apologize, Minister.
Hey, hey. The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As the Premier's been clear, we met last week. We had a business meeting over dinner. We made every effort to follow the public health guidelines at a couple of occasions during the evening. We came within the 6-foot mark. So, Mr. Speaker, for my part, I certainly extend my apology to all Albertans and the members of this House. But the fact of the matter is, Mr. Speaker, our economic recovery plan in this province is working. There's much work to do. But, Mr. Speaker, the Conference Board of Canada, National Bank, Desjardins, BMO all believe Alberta will lead the nation in GDP.